So there was a question on the table a couple weeks ago about assumable mortgages, and I said I would address it, and this is that video. And look at that. Side note, if you're gonna be 52 years old and roller skate, you should wear equipment at all times. So, I only fell once, but it was a good one. Had fun. Anyhow, assumable mortgages, the question was on the table. The answer is yes, assumable mortgages are a thing. Most trust deeds are assumable. So in Nevada, I'm gonna probably refer to it as trust deed because we are one of the 5 trust deed states in the United States. So there's a difference between a mortgage and a trust deed, but that's a whole other video. So Nevada is a trust deed state. Most trust deeds are assumable. However, those are formal assumptions. So what does that mean? That means the buyer has to apply and qualify to assume that mortgage just like they would a brand new financing loan. There's a couple issues that it raises. Number one issue is that it's going to add time to your transaction because traditionally, you're going to get an offer on a listing, or you have a buyer and you're going to go make an offer on a listing, and you've made sure that your buyer is already pre-qualified. They've already met with the lender, filled out an application, turned in tax returns, pay stubs. The lender's already started working on verifications, ran a few scenarios past them. We know what type of financing they're getting. It's all locked in. In an assumption, you can have a pre-qualified buyer. However, this entire process starts from zero the minute the offer is accepted with this lender. And there is a cost per assumption in most trust deeds that are assumable. Several $1,000s. I've seen it $1,200. I haven't done one in so many years. God only knows what it costs today. But the answer is yes, it happens. It's a possibility. It's a thing. Caveat number one, it's going to create more time in your transaction. And if you're the listing agent, if you're the seller, it's a little bit more volatile. So you want to make sure that that buyer is coming to the table with some credibility. The single most common problem with assumptions is that there's a deficiency in the cash the buyer has to influx into the transaction and the payoff of the mortgage and the purchase price. Meaning, if you've got a $400,000 purchase price and the seller owes $300,000 with a 3% interest rate locked for 30 years, 27 more years left on the mortgage, and your buyer has a whopping 5% down, guess what? There's a deficiency. What's 5% of $400,000? That's $20,000. The assumption, another cash infusion, is going to be $300,000. So now we're at $320,000. But the purchase price is $400,000. So what happens to the $80,000? Where does the $80,000 come from? So if the buyer doesn't have the entire amount to make the seller whole, netting him what he owes on the loan to the purchase price, there's going to be a deficiency. Now, back in the day, I don't recommend these. Please, this is like alert, alert, alert. Do not recommend this type of financing. We're not there yet, but it's a possibility. We might as well talk about it. Back in the day when interest rates were 12, 14%, when I started in the industry, which was in the early 90s, and that was thanks to the savings and loan crisis. These types of transactions were very attractive. And so what we did was we got very creative. We used paper called an all-inclusive trust deed or a contract for sale. They're very risky. I don't recommend them, and I don't think that we're there yet in this market. But what would happen in this instance when there was that deficiency? Let's talk about that $80,000 deficiency in the example I was using earlier. The seller could, if he wanted to, carry that $80,000 in the form of a second mortgage on the property. So he would record a second deed of trust on the property, and the buyer would make payments on the first mortgage, and the buyer would make payments to the seller for the second mortgage. Typically that second mortgage was for short term, maybe it was an interest only payment with a balloon due in 5 years or something of that nature. Now, we all know in the real world, most sellers are not capable of doing that. Most sellers need to be cashed out so they can move on their merry way. However, we did a lot of those transactions. We made it work. We kept real estate moving. Here's what's truly going on in the market right now, guys. We're seeing a ton of new property coming on the market. You guys all know that. If you're a listing agent, if you have any listings out there, they're sitting on the market a little longer. If you are lucky enough to take a new listing in the very near future, do yourself and the seller a favor and get aggressive on the price. Get that property on the market as quick as possible. If they're still in denial about what that property is worth, it's your job to talk them off the ledge for their own good and for your sanity. So we've got all these new properties coming on the market. We're not seeing huge decline in value, but what they're not reporting is there's a decline in net proceeds. Why? Because sellers are getting aggressive, smart sellers getting aggressive, and they're paying buyers closing costs. They're offering to pay points to buy their interest rate down. See, this is all helpful in the real estate transaction, right? If all we need to do is get that buyer's payment where they can afford it, or get their cash infusion into the property where they can make it, and then we're still moving real estate, right? So we will definitely start seeing a decrease in value just because supply and demand dictates value. So if we're gonna have a ton more supply coming onto the market and demand is a little less because now less buyers can qualify because of interest rates going up, we'll likely see property values decline. Do we foresee a crash? I don't. Most economists don't see a crash, but we'll see a small decline in value. However, with that being said, if you sold a house to somebody in the last year or two, they should still be thanking you in 5 years, right? Because I'm gonna take my son, for instance. Sold him a house 2 years ago, $285,000. He was so mad at me. It's like, Mom, you're a real estate agent. I can't believe I have to pay $285,000. Well, today we could sell that house for $400,000 conservatively. So, I'm his hero right now today. Well, let's say in the next year, 2 years, that property decreases 30% in value. So 400,000 times 30% is 120,000. That's huge, right? Well, that's gonna take him to 280,000. Is he really hurt? He's paying his mortgage payment, principal reduction down, he's gaining equity. He could go up here, down here. We don't know that it's gonna be 30%. That's just an estimate. Anybody who does say they know what's gonna happen in this market or that they have a crystal ball, they're lying to you, so don't listen to them. Nobody knows. Everything is way too volatile right now. But the moral of the story is, if you sold somebody a house a year or 2 years ago, they could maybe track their value like this and then like this, but at the end of the day, in 5 years, they're just gonna be able to draw a little line like this, and they'll probably increase in value a little bit anyway. So don't worry about this. This is not what matters. Stability, a family being able to have a budget every month, having a roof over their head, having a place to raise their family, having a sanctuary, having a home. That's what's important, right? That's our job. That's what we do. So this was a video to answer a question about assumptions, and I kind of went off on a tangent, but as always, I'm always here to help out. If you have any other questions, let me know. Keep doing what you're doing. Things are gonna get fun. I can tell you right now, because I've lived through many markets, that fortunes are made in down times. So don't get discouraged. Find a niche, fill it. Plenty of real estate transactions are going to happen. Peace. I'll talk to you later.